Learners of mathematics, welcome to session 1 of Unit 3 in the course Assessment in Maths Education. In the previous session, we looked at definitions of source, validity, and reliability. In this session 1 of Unit 3, we are looking at assessment of learning, assessment for learning, and assessment as learning. I am Mukaila Tasmani, your course instructor for this course. By the end of this session, you should be able to distinguish between assessment for learning, assessment of learning, and assessment as a learning. As a teacher, you should be able to explain your rules in each category of these assessments. Let's begin with assessment of learning. Assessment of learning. It's usually summative and usually occurs at defined key points during a unit of work or at the end of a unit, term or semester, and may be used to rank or grade student. So when you are teaching in any senior high school, basic school, or primary school, any place in this world or in this country, and you conduct assessments at the end of a unit or at the end of, let's say, terms examination or semester examination, or maybe at the end of an entire period, then we say that you are doing what we call assessment of learning. Assessment of learning. So it often contributes to pivotal decisions that will affect students' future. So once you do that, you try to make decisions about the student future. So assessment of learning makes it possible for the teacher, students, and their parents to know how well each student has completed the learning task. So at this semester, you conduct exams. Your parents will take the results, or you yourself, a student, you check your results and see how well you did, and that will tell you whether you did well or not during that semester. Or maybe it's at the end of a certain topic. Let's say you are teaching linear equations. You finish teaching linear equation, you want to move to, let's say, linear inequality. So you conduct assessment about linear equation at the end of the topic. The student will get to know whether they understood or not. You, the teacher, you will also get to know that the students you taught well or not, and it will also help you to make informed decisions. So assessment of learning is very important. Let's look at the purposes of assessment of learning. Can you list some of them down before we look at that? Purposes of assessment of learning. Why do you do assessment of learning? Okay, to aid planning for future learning goals and pathways for students. So that's the first one. In this one, self-explanatory, as I've already talked about that. To provide evidence of achievement to the wider community, including parents, educators, the students themselves, and outside groups. So, and that is it. So at the end of the day, you get to know the student achievement, whether the student achieved very well or not. And this decision is very important to WAEC for making placement, various universities for selection criteria, and then the student will also know whether he is performing well or not. And that is evidence to that decision. Or even people want to employ you, they check your results. Some people request for a transcript because it's always done at the end of the semester. Your exams are done at the end of the semester, and they will get to know your results, and so and that will help them to know your achievement in that particular course, whether you fit for that work or not. So it's very, very important. Okay, next. To provide a transparent interpretation across all audiences. As I've already said, all audiences get transparent interpretation about your achievement, and with that, wherever you take it to, you cannot do further work there. You get A1 in maths, everybody will say you have A1 in maths, or you had A1 in maths. So it is very, very important. So let's see teachers' role in assessment of learning. Effective assessment of learning requires teachers to provide a rationale for undertaking a particular assessment of learning at a particular point in time. Great. Also provide clear description of the intended learning. So as a teacher, you should provide clear description of the intended learning. The students should know your intention, the intended learning, what you want them to achieve. and it should be clear for the student. By the end of this lesson, let's say we are teaching quadratic equation. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to know how to solve quadratic equation using factorization approach. So your intention is clear, and with that, student will know what they want to achieve. Processes that make it possible for students to demonstrate their competence and score. So you should create that enabling environment that will enable students to demonstrate their competence and score. Remember that each student is serving their different scores all together. So you should create that environment for the student to be able to demonstrate their scores. Okay, a range of alternative mechanisms for assessing the same outcomes. So as a teacher, you should provide a range of alternative mechanisms for assessing the same outcomes. People learn good by project work, others too are very good and to and poor system memorization approach. Others too are not good in that. So you should provide different approach or mechanism for assessing the same outcomes for the student. Okay, so let's look at assessment for learning. Happens during learning of more than once. So let's look at that. It's formative. If you remember, previously we said it's summative. So this assessment for learning is formative in nature. It's really occurring throughout the teaching and learning process to clarify student learning and understanding. We say assessment of learning is summative, and therefore assessment for learning too is formative, and it's throughout the teaching and learning process to clarify student learning and understanding. So you are teaching throughout the learning. You wouldn't say, I want to finish this topic before I give an assignment. I want to finish this topic before I conduct an exercise. No, that is assessment of learning. For the assessment for learning, what you do is that in the course of your teaching, you keep the assessment for the students. You will not finish the topic, so throughout the entire period. It embeds assessment processes throughout the teaching and learning process to constantly adjust instructional strategy. So whilst we are teaching, it gives student exercise. Let's say we are teaching, let's take one fraction. So fraction, we are adding fractions with different denominators. So the approach you are using is find the LCM approach and those stuff. And where you conduct exercise there, you realize that student couldn't do. So as a teacher, what do you do by then? So you see the importance for assessment for learning. It will help you to adjust your instructional strategy that will suit the student understanding. So assessment for learning, it doesn't wait for you to finish the entire syllabus, entire semester before you conduct exams. No, they don't believe in that. So there's a wide variety of information that teachers collect about students' learning process, which helps in determining what action to take to move students' learning forward. And basically, that is a goal for every teacher. Assessment for learning involves teachers using evidence about student knowledge, understanding, and scores to inform their teaching. So students are given feedback and advice on how to improve their work. So once you get student feedback in the course of your teaching, you conduct exercise, you give them assignment, you give them project work, different approach. You get to know their students' outcome. Then you can advise them, or Kofi or Amma, you will use this approach best. Can you try this one and let's see? Or the student does well, you've done very well, keep it up, and that motivates students to learn hard. So assessment for learning is very, very important. Alright, so the philosophy behind assessment for learning is that assessment and teaching should be integrated into a whole that is focusing on recognizing how much learning is taking place in the common tasks of the school day and how much insight into student learning teachers can mine from this material. That is according to Chen and McNamee 2005 76. Okay, so you can see the assessment for learning is actually ongoing assessment, and it allows teachers to monitor students on day-to-day basis and modify their teaching based on what the student need to be successful, and that is very fantastic. So assessment of learning is also very great. They will not wait for the end of the period. So you keep on assessing students whilst teaching is ongoing. And as a teacher, you can see it will actually help you a lot. It will help you to diversify your approach of teaching to in case students are not getting the concept. The essential rules of you, the teacher, in assessment for learning. What are they? So the first one, identify particular learning needs for students or groups. That is having clear instructional goals and communicating them to the students. I think I've explained this one already. Using assessment to enhance motivation and confidence. So as I said, you should always motivate your students and also give them confidence. Example is Kofi or Amma, they solve quadratic equation. Very nice. So you mentioned their name. You did very well solving this one using elimination, what do you call it? Factorization approach. Thank you very much and keep it up. So somebody too couldn't solve it. Don't say, oh, they are born, you are not good, you are dumb student. No. Advise the student that you couldn't do, but or maybe that's not the way to do, and this is how we do it. You can do it better next time. I trust you. I believe you can do it. Once you give these words of encouragement to the student, you see it actually motivates students, and then even if they are not good in that area, it compels them to learn better, to learn more for that. So it's very necessary as far as assessment for learning is concerned. It also, as a teacher, you should also provide immediate feedback and direction to students. Once you give them assessment, don't just mark and give them the marks and keep quiet. When you do that, you've punished the student. As a teacher, you've punished the student. For a good teacher, you provide them feedback, give them the marks, the scores they do or they had, and then just also give them the directions. Where they had it wrong, give them the direction to that. Where they had good, compliment them. If you have alternate approach, you can add to that. Then you compliment them. Let them know. Okay. So you should also communicate with parents and guidance. Some students need special guidance or special needs. With that instance, just talk to the parents. Your word is very good in mathematics. I wish you take good care of him for me, or maybe put him in so and so, or maybe award his or her mathematical ability or IQ is not high, so let's do this and this and this to help you award. Or you can also bring the parents on board. What can we do? As a teacher, you are there, you are teaching the student. You suggest for the parents to also come in so that you can help. Sometimes students should be placed in special schools, and you can also help the teachers or the parents or the guardians make such decisions. So assessment for learning is very important. Okay, so purposes of assessments of learning. Assessment for learning. Purposes. Why do you conduct assessment for learning? Assessment for learning reflects a view of learning in which assessment helps students learning better. Students learn better rather than just achieve a better mark. Unlike the summative one, the assessment of learning, what students go is that they want to get better grade, like the WAEC. At the end of the day, some of the students will not learn at all. They're saying they are waiting for a poor. They want to cheat in exams. At the end of the day, they want to get a better grade, and once they get a better grade or mark, that is it. That is not what assessment for learning is. So here is students should learn better to understand rather than just want to pass and go. Assessment for learning involves formal and informal assessment activities as part of learning and inform the plan of future learning. So there's formal and informal assessment here. So what do you think could be the difference between the two? So learn that, go through, and I'm sure we meet that as another section in the course of this course. Assessment for learning provides effective feedback that motivates the learner and can lead to improvement. On what way? I've already explained that. Assessment for learning is inclusive of all learners. So here, because it is ongoing process, it doesn't happen at the end of the instructional period. So all learners are taking part. You do class exercise in your class, everybody takes part, whether the person is good or not, the person takes part. And then you can also see students with all special needs, then you provide them with alternative assessment. So we've been looking at alternative assessment or alternative assessment, which is very, very important. So assessment of learning actually is very, very important. Let's see the last one, assessment as learning. What is assessment as learning? Assessment as learning occurs when students are their own assessors. You allow students to assess for their own, or the assessors their own. That becomes assessment as learning. The students monitor their own learning, ask questions, and use a range of strategies to decide what they know and can do, and how to use assessment for new learning. Assessment as learning helps students to take more responsibility for their own learning and monitoring future directions. So here the room is given for the student to monitor their own learning. So it's student-centered, actually student-centered more rather than teacher-centered. It's full of student-centered. Okay. Purposes of assessment of learning. As we said, assessment of learning actually gives room for students to be their own assessors. Let's see the importance. Assessment for learning encourages students to take responsibility for their own learning. As I've said, assessment for learning requires students to ask questions about their learning. Okay, so you can read more, find more in your course assessment. It's very, very interesting. Teachers' role in assessment of learning. As a teacher, you should guide students in setting their own goals and monitoring their progress towards them. So we got students to set their own goals, then you keep on monitoring. So you are acting as a facilitator, monitoring what is going on and giving directions. Provide exemplars and models of good practice and quality work that reflect curriculum outcomes. Okay, so go through, you want to shut in the video, which you can go through all these things. They are very, very important. These are the teachers' role. Create an environment where it is safe for students to take chances and where support is really available. Okay, so that ends the session. In this session, we look at assessment for learning as learning and then for learning. Remember, we said that assessment of learning is summative, assessment for learning is also formative, ongoing process. So of the three, which of them will you go for? 8. What do you think is best? Thank you for your time for this session.